sources with security clearances to sell out our country, and leakers will be held accountable.
We'll discuss if investigators can plug the leaks and the latest developments in the Russia probe with Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. It's a Fox News Sunday exclusive. Then, as special counsel Robert Mueller takes evidence about Russian interference in the election to a grand jury, the president keeps saying there's nothing there.
The Russia story is a total fabrication. It's just an excuse for the greatest loss in the history of American politics. That's all it is.
We'll talk with Republican Senator Thom Tillis, who has just introduced a bill to protect the special counsel from being fired. Plus, as Congress leaves town for a long August recess, we'll ask our Sunday panel about all the unfinished business they'll face when they come back after Labor Day. All right now on Fox News Sunday. And hello again from Fox News in Washington. If you still had any doubt how serious the leaks problem is, all you had to do this week was open your newspaper or turn on your television and see transcripts of President Trump's conversations with world leaders. And this comes, as we learned, again through leaks, Robert Mueller is taking his Russia investigation to a grand jury. On Friday, Attorney General Sessions announced measures to try to stop leaks he says endanger American security. Joining me now for his first Sunday show interview is Rod Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General and the man who appointed the special counsel after Sessions recused himself. Mr. Rosenstein, welcome to Fox News Sunday.
Thank you, Chris. I'm glad to be here.
Attorney General Sessions says that there has been a surge in criminal referrals from intelligence agencies about leaks of classified information since President Trump took office. He says there have been as many in just these 6 months as there were in the previous 3 years. My question is, do you see a concerted effort by people inside this government to hurt or take down or try to take down President Trump?
Chris, you know, we evaluate every referral we receive based on the facts and circumstances of the particular leak. And so, as the Attorney General described, we've had a surge in referrals to the department, and we're responding appropriately. We're going to devote more resources, reevaluate our procedures, and make sure we investigate every one of those leaks in an appropriate way.
But you must have some thoughts about why there has been a surge in these referrals, as many in the 6 months of the Trump presidency as in the last 3 years of the Obama presidency.
That's right, Chris. We have seen a surge in referrals. We've seen an increase in the number of leaks, and we're going to respond appropriately and try to establish an effective deterrent. Criminal prosecution isn't the only way to prevent leaks, but it's an important part of the solution.
The Attorney General says your department is pursuing 3 times as many criminal investigations as you inherited from the Obama administration. Give us a sense of scale. Are we talking 1 to 3, or are we talking more in the neighborhood of 10 to 30?
Well, we don't publicize the precise number of leaks, the precise number of referrals, so we've only talked about it in terms of the proportion. But that significant increase has necessitated an increase in resources, and so we have reprioritized our cases within the National Security Division. We're providing appropriate supervision at a high level. We've created a new unit within the FBI to focus on those leaks, and we're going to devote whatever resources are necessary to get them under control.
You say you can't give the exact number. Can you give us a sense of scale?
Well, that would give the number, Chris. I think we've been very clear about that. We've only talked about the proportion, a tripling of the number of referrals so far this year.
But I take it if it were 1 to 3, this wouldn't be a serious problem that we're talking about.
If it were 1 to 3, it wouldn't be as many as we have. That's true.
So I had a feeling this was going to be a tough interview, and I'm preparing for it. Okay, some of the people who engage in leaks, I don't have to tell you, are not the so-called members of the deep state, faceless bureaucrats inside intelligence agencies. They are White House officials. They are members of Congress. If you find any of them have committed these leaks, have disclosed classified information, will you prosecute?
Well, Chris, what we need to look at in every leak referral we get, we look at the facts and circumstances. What was the potential harm caused by the leak? What were the circumstances? That's more important to us than who it is, who is the leaker. So if we identify somebody, no matter what their position is, if they violated the law and that case warrants prosecution, we'll prosecute it.
Including White House officials and members of Congress?
Including anybody who breaks the law.
The Attorney General says that you are going to also review the policy when it comes to reporters and whether or not you'll try to subpoena information from them to disclose their sources. Here's how Mr. Sessions put it.
We respect the important role that the press plays and will give them respect, but it is not unlimited. They cannot place lives at risk with impunity.
But the head of the Reporters Committee for the Freedom of the Press says what the Attorney General is suggesting is a dangerous threat to the freedom of the American people to know and understand what their leaders are doing and why. Your response?
I think that's an overreaction, Chris. The Attorney General has been very clear. We're after the leakers, not the journalists. We're after people who are committing crimes. And so we're going to devote the resources we need to identify who is responsible for those leaks and who has violated the law and hold them accountable.
Well, there are a couple of aspects to that. First of all, you say you're after the leakers, not the reporters. President Trump has reportedly suggested at one point prosecuting the reporters if they leak if they publish classified information. Are you ruling that out?
Chris, we have the same position on that, I think, as Attorney General Holder. That is that we don't prosecute journalists for doing their jobs. We look at the facts and circumstances of each case, and we determine whether somebody's committed a crime and whether it's appropriate to hold them accountable for it.
And you don't consider the publishing of classified information as a crime?
Well, Chris, I don't think you can draw any general line like that. It depends upon the facts and circumstances. Generally speaking, reporters who publish information are not committing a crime, but there might be a circumstance where they do. I haven't seen any of those to date, but I wouldn't rule it out in the event that there were a case where a reporter was purposely violating the law, then they might be a suspect as well. But that's not our goal here. Our goal is to prevent the leaks. And so that's what we're after here. We haven't revised the policy with regard to reporters.
Okay, but there's another aspect to this, which is if a reporter gets information from somebody, puts it out, and the beginning of the Obama administration, they were very aggressive in going after their sources. And if you subpoena information and they refuse to disclose it, they can still end up in jail. At the end of the Obama administration, after a backlash from reporters, they loosened up on that. And first of all, it had to be approved specifically by the Attorney General, and it was kind of a last resort to go after reporters' sources. You are reviewing that.
Yes, Chris, that's a different issue. That policy has been in existence for a very long time. Attorney General Holder revised that in 2015. It's possible he got it exactly right, but maybe he didn't. We're going to take a fresh look at that. We've gotten feedback from our career prosecutors and agents that some of the procedural hurdles are delaying their investigations, so I think it's important for us to take a fresh look at it and evaluate whether or not there are any improvements that should be made.
And what if that means in your effort to get sources that you end up putting a reporter who refuses to disclose that source in jail?
I'm not going to answer a hypothetical, Chris. As I said, I think it depends upon the facts and circumstances in each case.
We learned this week that Special Counsel Robert Mueller is taking his case to a grand jury. I know you can't and won't talk about the details of that case, but as a general proposition, does the fact that a prosecutor takes a case to a grand jury, what does that say about the likelihood of indictments?
Chris, you're right that I'm not going to comment on the case. I'm not going to comment about whether Director Mueller has or hasn't opened a grand jury. You read a lot about criminal investigations in the media, and some of those stories are false. We just don't comment on investigations. That's important for a number of reasons. First of all, we don't want to disparage anybody who may be a subject in an investigation. Number two, we don't want to interfere with the investigation by...
But I'm asking you a different question. What does it say when a prosecutor takes a case, in general, to a grand jury about the likelihood of indictments?
In general, Chris, it doesn't tell you anything about the likelihood of indictments because we conduct investigations and we make a determination at some point in the course of the investigation about whether charges are appropriate.
And what's the advantage in terms of investigation to taking a case to a grand jury?
Many of our investigations, Chris, involve the use of the grand jury. It's an appropriate way to gather documents. Sometimes you bring witnesses in to make sure that you get their full testimony. It's just a tool that we use like any other tool in the course of our investigations.
There are reports that Mueller has expanded his investigation to go into the president's finances. He was asked about that recently.
Mueller was looking at your finances, your family's finances, unrelated to Russia. Is that a red line?
Would that be a breach of what his actual...
I would say yes. Yeah, I would say yes.
Now, I know I'm on very dangerous territory here, but hear me out on this, because I'm not asking about the investigation. When you appointed Mueller, and you were the one who did, you had to sign an order authorizing the appointment of a special counsel. And you said that he was authorized to investigate any coordination with Russia and, I want to put these words on the screen, any matters that arose or may arise directly from the investigation. My question is, does that mean that there are no red lines that Mueller or any special counsel can investigate under the terms of your order anything he finds?
Well, Chris, the special counsel is subject to the rules and regulations of the Department of Justice, and we don't engage in fishing expeditions. Now, that order that you read, that doesn't detail specifically who may be the subject of the investigation,
right, because
we don't reveal that publicly. But Bob Mueller understands, and I understand, the specific scope of the investigation, and so, no, it's not a fishing expedition.
I understand it's not a fishing expedition, but you say any matters that arose or may arise directly from the investigation. In the course of his investigation of the issues that he is looking at, if he finds evidence of a crime, can he look at that?
Well, Chris, if he finds evidence of a crime that's within the scope of what Director Mueller and I have agreed is the appropriate scope of his investigation, then he can. If it's something outside that scope, he needs to come to the acting Attorney General, at this time me, for permission to expand his investigation. But we don't talk about that publicly, and so the speculation you've seen in the news media, that's not anything that I've said. It's not anything Director Mueller said. We don't know who's saying it or how credible those sources are.
I mean, people ask about this, of course, because you have Ken Starr and Whitewater, and it began with a failed real estate deal in Arkansas and ended up with Monica Lewinsky. To expand, he would need to get approval from you to expand the nature of the investigation.
That's correct, just as did Ken Starr. You know, Ken Starr received an expansion, I believe was initiated by the Department of Justice, by Janet Reno, that resulted in that investigation.
In a speech on Thursday, the president called the Russia story a total fabrication, and he said, here's what Justice Department people should be investigating.
What the prosecutors should be looking at are Hillary Clinton's 33,000 deleted emails.
Do you view that as an order from the president?
Well, Chris, the president has put very responsible people in charge of the Department of Justice. Attorney General Sessions, Rachel Brand, who's been working with me, Chris Wray, who just took office last week, and we have many other qualified and responsible officials who are going to be joining us soon as they get through Senate confirmation to join the department. I can assure you that we are going to do the right thing and follow the rule of law.
But when the president, because he can order the Justice Department to do things, when he says, here's what prosecutors should be doing, they should be looking at Hillary Clinton, do you view that as an order?
No, Chris, I view what the president says publicly as something he said publicly. If the president wants to give orders to us in the department, he does that privately, and then if we have any feedback, we provide it to him.
And will you tell me whether or not he's given you an order?
I won't, Chris, but I can tell you the president has not directed us to investigate particular people. That wouldn't be right. That's not the way we operate.
Okay. A couple of other quick questions on other issues. Let's turn to the department's crackdown on illegal immigration. The Attorney General sent a letter this week to 4 cities struggling with gun violence, warning they won't be eligible for federal money to fight drug trafficking and gang crime unless they cooperate with immigration officials. How do you respond to critics who say the solution here, which is to cut off federal funding to these cities that have a real crime problem, is worse than the problem?
Chris, the challenge that the Attorney General is addressing there is that cities that release criminal aliens put everybody at risk. They put citizens at risk, and we've seen that most recently in this horrible case in Oregon where we had an illegal alien who was subject to a detainer that was ignored by local authorities who released him, and he committed a violent crime. And that's not the only thing, Chris. We put law enforcement officers at risk because when somebody is already in jail and they're subject to a deportation order, if the local authorities ignore that order, put them back out on the street, that means that our federal agents need to go out and track them down, and that puts them at risk. And that's the kind of danger the Attorney General is seeking to address.
Finally, the Attorney General has told prosecutors to pursue the toughest sentences in all cases, including mandatory minimums. Conservatives like Senators Rand Paul and Mike Lee, who have been pushing for criminal justice reform, say the result of this is you're going to end up filling the prisons with nonviolent, low level drug offenders instead of going after serious criminals, violent criminals. Your response to that?
Well, Chris, first of all, our priority in the Department of Justice is to prosecute high-level drug dealers, not to fill our prisons with low-level drug dealers or drug users. And the Attorney General's policy actually just returns the department to the traditional policy that we've been following since the Carter administration, and that is that the presumption in each case is to charge the most serious, readily provable offense, but in the event that our prosecutors believe that that's not justified, they can make an exception. They just need to document it. That's the policy.
Mr. Rosenstein, thank you. Thank you for your time. Good to talk with you. I've got to say, it was a challenging interview, but I really enjoyed it. It was really quite interesting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good to be with you.
Up next, Republican Senator Thom Tillis, who has introduced a measure to protect the special counsel from being fired for improper reasons. A look outside the Beltway at the Queen City, Charlotte, North Carolina. As Robert Mueller's investigation heats up, there's a move by senators from both parties to protect the special counsel from being fired. Our next guest, Republican Senator Thom Tillis, co-sponsored a bill this week to do just that. Senator, why did you introduce the legislation and how would it work?
Well, the reason we introduced the legislation, this is something that I talked about last year and the year before under the Obama administration. What this legislation does is codify the current procedures within the Department of Justice. The only thing it adds is a review after the fact, after a special counsel's been removed, subject to a 3-judge panel, so that we can make sure that it was done for proper cause.
Your co-sponsor, Democratic Senator Chris Coons, said that the reason that this bill was introduced, and it's up on the screen, to expressly designed to restrain the president's power to act in an abrupt and inappropriate way. Now, you say you'd been thinking about this for years, but there seems to be some belief, and it certainly is backed up by what Senator Coons said, concern about this president and his reaction, very negative reaction, to Special Counsel Robert Mueller's investigation.
Well, I think that's right. That's why we put the effective date back to the date of the hire of the current special counsel. But this is an opportunity. Oftentimes when you have the other party in the White House, people want these kinds of things, but they don't have the majority support to do it. This is an opportunity to put something on the books that applies to this current situation, but it will be in effect going forward. This is very important. It's an important part of what we need to do to reestablish the public trust in the Department of Justice. That's why I'm taking the opportunity to do it now, because I know the very people on my side of the aisle who may have some concerns with it would be pounding the table for this if we were talking about a President Hillary Clinton